The sun rose over the busy ports and crowded streets of medieval Europe, a world alive with the energy of trade, chatter, and daily life. People went about their business unaware of the shadow creeping silently toward them, a shadow that would turn their world upside down. It started far away, beyond the deserts and mountains, in distant lands connected by the winding Silk Road, a path not just for silk and spices, but also for a deadly secret carried by the tiniest creatures. Rats, those ordinary vermin, became unwitting soldiers in a terrifying war against humanity. Fleas living on these rats carried a mysterious and deadly bacterium, one that would soon be known as the Black Death. When ships from the east docked in Italian ports like Messina and Genoa in 1347, they brought with them not only goods but the seeds of death. The people of Europe had never seen anything like what followed. At first, the sickness seemed strange and isolated, a few cases here and there. But soon, it spread with a ferocity that no one could contain. Families watched helplessly as their loved ones developed strange and terrifying symptoms. Painful lumps appeared under the arms and on the neck, turning black and oozing. Fevers rose, bodies shook with chills, and within days, the victims would fall into a deep and deadly sleep from which many never awoke. The hospitals overflowed, but medicine was powerless. Doctors tried leeches, bloodletting, prayers, and potions, but none of it helped. Fear rippled through towns and cities like wildfire. People whispered of curses and divine punishment. Some fled their homes, others locked themselves away, but no one was safe. The plague did not discriminate. It struck the wealthy merchant as easily as the poor laborer. Crowded streets, dark alleys, and packed marketplaces became death traps. Traders abandoned their carts, ships were left deserted at docks, and the hum of life slowed to a terrifying silence. As the disease spread, people sought answers, but the truth was as elusive as the invisible killer itself. Some blamed the stars, others accused their neighbors, and in many places, minorities such as Jewish communities were falsely accused of poisoning wells. This led to horrific acts of violence, as fear and anger twisted into hatred. Despite the chaos, some rulers attempted to fight back. Cities imposed quarantines, banning ships and travelers from entering. Streets were cleaned, and homes of the infected were burned. But the plague was relentless. It moved with the wind, the rats, and the fleas, spreading steadily from port to village, from city to city. In Paris, London, and Florence, entire neighborhoods emptied. Graveyards overflowed with the dead, mass burials became the grim norm. Priests struggled to bury the dead and comfort the living, but the sheer scale of death was overwhelming. Communities were shattered, and many believed the end of the world had come. Yet, amid this devastation, new realities began to emerge. The labor force shrank dramatically as millions perished. Fields lay untilled and workshops empty. Those who survived found themselves in a position of newfound power. Landowners who once held absolute control were forced to negotiate with peasants and workers demanding better wages and conditions. The social order that had dominated Europe for centuries began to tremble. Feudalism, the rigid system tying peasants to their lords, faced serious challenges. Towns slowly began to recover, but the scars of the plague left deep marks on the collective psyche. The Black Death was more than a medical catastrophe, it was a turning point in history. The old ways were questioned. The church's influence waned as many questioned why God would allow such suffering. New ideas started to take root in the ashes of the old world. The plague's legacy was complex. It destroyed millions of lives but also reshaped economies, societies, and cultures. Art and literature reflected the omnipresence of death, from haunting images of dancing skeletons to tales of despair and hope. For those who lived through it, the Black Death was a nightmare beyond imagining. For those who came after, it became a lesson in human resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest times, change and renewal are possible. The plague did not just take lives, it shattered the very fabric of society. With such a massive portion of the population gone, everything people had known about work, power, and survival changed overnight. Landowners who had once held unquestioned control over their peasants found themselves desperate for laborers. Fields remained barren without those to till the soil, and workshops fell silent. The few survivors soon realized their value had increased. They could demand higher wages, better treatment, and freedoms previously unimaginable. For the first time in centuries, the lower classes began to challenge the old hierarchies. Peasants revolted in some regions, refusing to return to the harsh conditions that had bound them to the land. This unrest shook the foundations of medieval Europe and accelerated the decline of the feudal system. The Black Death, a cruel and merciless force, had unexpectedly become a catalyst for social change. The Church, once the unquestioned authority guiding people's lives and offering comfort, faced its own crisis. The sheer scale of death led many to question the power of prayer and the fairness of divine judgment. Clergy members themselves were not spared, and as priests died in droves, the quality of spiritual leadership declined. Some people turned to radical religious movements, flagellants who whipped themselves in public penance, hoping to appease an angry God. Others drifted toward skepticism, their faith shaken by the failure to stop the plague. Communities struggled to understand the reasons behind such suffering. Theories ranged from astrological alignments to poisonous air, what they called miasma. Without scientific knowledge, superstition filled the void. Fear bred hatred, and tragically, minority groups, especially Jewish populations, were scapegoated and persecuted. False accusations of well poisoning led to massacres and expulsions, adding more tragedy to an already dark chapter. Despite these horrors, the Black Death forced advances in medicine and public health. The desperate attempts to contain the disease, city quarantines, isolation of the sick, laid the groundwork for future understanding of contagion. Slowly, people learned that cleanliness, distancing, and limiting contact could save lives. Though the cause remained unknown for centuries, these early practices were important steps forward. The economic impact was profound. With fewer people to work the land and fill trades, goods became scarce, prices rose, and inflation followed. But workers' improved bargaining power shifted wealth away from the traditional aristocracy toward merchants and skilled laborers. This redistribution of wealth would fuel the growth of cities and the rise of a middle class, setting the stage for the Renaissance. Culturally, the omnipresence of death left a lasting imprint on art and literature. The macabre imagery of skeletons dancing with the living, known as the danse macabre, reminded all of mortality's inevitability. Writers like Giovanni Boccaccio captured the fear, loss, and fleeting joys of life in works such as the Decameron, where survivors fled the plague to tell stories of love, tragedy, and human resilience. In the grand sweep of history, the Black Death was a brutal reset. It tore down the old world, but from its ashes, new ideas and systems emerged. Europe slowly healed, learning painful lessons about vulnerability and strength. The plague's legacy echoes still today, a reminder of how fragile life can be, and how courage and adaptation can carry humanity through even the darkest times. Centuries later, when new pandemics arise, people look back to that terrifying time and ask, how did the world recover? What can we learn from the Black Death's horror and resilience? The answers lie not only in history books but in the enduring spirit of those who faced the unknown and chose to survive. Though death was everywhere, so too was hope. For every lost soul, a new generation rose, rebuilding towns and lives, rewriting the future. The Black Death changed everything, but it did not end the story of Europe. It was a beginning, forged in fear, pain, and ultimately, in the unyielding will to live.